Good afternoon. I'm going to talk to you today on the subject of change and feeling, and how those two can be powerful allies. Last week, a report by WWF revealed that 60% of the vertebrate wildlife had disappeared within the last 40 years. The International Union for Conservation of Nature has identified that resources overuse, urbanization, agriculture, and diseases are a threat to 70% of the living species on this planet. Well, I guess you all know some figures, and I also guess that you are here in this room today because you think that we should do something for our planet. But is environmental action something that can only be decided at an intellectual level? Is that enough to get you in motion? And then when you do, what will be the fuel that will keep you aligned with your values? So here is what I learned about it in the last decade as an artist, as a photographer, and environmentalist. I graduated from 3 of the best universities in the world, in France, in the US, in the UK. So I guess I was one of the happy few with a great deal of international perspective. I secured a good job as a management consultant in the biotech industry, and my plan was to do something for the well-being of humans. But as time passed, I became skeptical about the impact I could have by helping sell pharmaceutical products. I didn't agree with the mechanics of this industry and decided to leave my job. My only problem is that I didn't know what else to do to be of better use. To paraphrase Théodore Monod, the French naturalist and humanist, I was doing things because I could, but not because I knew exactly why I was doing them. So as many people, I guess, I went traveling to find inspiration. But it wasn't until I came back in December 2009 that the inspiration found me. The media was loaded with pictures of environmental degradation as the Copenhagen Climate Summit was approaching. So all of a sudden, I actually felt that I had found this pressing issue that I needed to get involved with. And I also admired the work of documentary photographer Sébastien Salgado, and I decided to let my creativity speak and carry out a photo project about climate change. I thought of going to Copenhagen to document the summit. But I realized I would get there, find myself in the snow, without an ability to find housing, as the town was completely submerged with participants, and that taking photos of the event wouldn't take me where I wanted. So even before making the first photograph of my project, I flaked. I didn't go. Tell me about a master plan. That was my first learning. It's actually hard to act for climate change. But no one to give up. I trained as a photographer. I finally managed to meet Sébastien Salgado in his Paris studio and asked him a ton of advice because I was planning to go to Indonesia to document deforestation, which, as you know, is one of the major causes for carbon emissions today. So this is me, a few months later, in a canoe on the river of Sumatra, traveling to my first ground photo story. Look at that innocent face, completely unprepared to run into the paper mafia, kicking photographers and journalists out of those areas. The few fixers I'd found told me that they took some TV crews there, that they got captured and tortured, even though they were backed by major NGOs. So imagine me and my modest ambitions on my canoe. So once again, I changed my plans. I decided to stay away from those actively deforested areas, and instead, I heard about a community of former illegal loggers who had reconverted to sustainable agroforestry. So here I was, traveling from canoe to a dodgy bus with a chicken, without any leg space for over 30 hours in the mountains of the south of Sumatra. I was going to meet inspirational people acting to mitigate climate change. Well, that's until the bus tire went flat. I guess that's takeaway 2. The universe may also get in the way when you're trying to act for climate change. Luckily, after a few hours, off we were again, after some hard fixing from the drivers on the bus tires. And a few long road bends later, I was welcomed by a community of former illegal loggers in the forest of the south of Sumatra. They had stopped cutting trees, and they put their chainsaws away after a moment of realization that they could do better for themselves by doing good for their own forest. They did that for themselves and for their children, but in doing so, they became aware of the impact deforestation had far beyond their village, beyond their region, or even their country. So I stayed there for a week making portraits, and the plan was finally starting to take shape. I would tell the stories of those women and men around the world who work every day to mitigate climate change. And even better, nobody would try to slice me in the process. So that's how Climate Heroes was born. I came back home and I knew I had to take this project one step further. So I reached out to other photographers on social media, complete strangers, and asked them if they would join me. We formed a group of 10 people, and for 6 years, we documented the stories of the climate heroes. Stories of citizens, of activists, of scientists, of entrepreneurs who work every day and can inspire more of us to start acting to mitigate climate change too. The story of Jintana is one of those. She was photographed by Luke in Thailand, and you see her on the beach where they were planning to build a massive coal plant. So she fought to the peril of her life, and she was actually shot at several times just to try to protect this piece of landscape. Bun Salut, defending the forests of Cambodia with his group of fellow eco-activist monks. We told the story of Brent Smith. Before he was a fisherman for McDonald's, he was rattling the bottom of the oceans to fish for cod. Now he's inventing a system to grow kelp and oysters underwater for food, but also to de-acidify our oceans. Perrine and Charles, promoting permaculture and demonstrating its power in France. As the movement was growing, I reached out to NGOs, Oxfam, WWF, 350.org, Global Call for Climate Action, and we photographed more and more climate heroes for the 2014 Climate March. I traveled to New York to present the project at the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And magazines also finally started taking interest in those positive stories. This is the story of Dr. Van Nie. He's helping the populations of the Mekong Delta adapt to the salinity change in the water due to ocean level rise. Shewang Norfel in the Himalayas. He's also mitigating the effects of melting glacier waters, and many others. 5 years later, after starting this project, I find myself on the largest dam site of the Gambia in Africa, photographing this woman. Among the heaps of garbage and the vultures flying around us in the sunset, she has been working for 15 years, leading a group of 2,000 women across the country to recycle plastic and educate Gambians about proper waste management. We presented the project at COP21 in December 2015 in Paris, and the response of the public was great. We were all very optimistic about the ability of the world to cut carbon emissions. But as you may know, in the last year, those have started rising again. On average, 1.8% in Europe. In France, my home country, there was an increase of 3.2%. And in the Netherlands, where we are today, 2.3%. So I guess acting for climate change hasn't gone easier along the years, has it? But maybe that's because we need a change in perspective after all. As Einstein had the intuition to put it, no problems can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. So as an artist today, I'm using all I learned on this journey through climate action, and I'm working to trigger more than just intellectual reaction, but rather an emotional response. And this is the power of art and photograph to allow such things. In my next project, World Keepers, I explore how sensations can allow us to stay more human, compassionate, and stop destroying our planet. Sensations are a more important entry point to trigger action. They allow us to reconnect deep down inside with our naturality. And we've gone too far away, distant from nature. So I'm drawing from my feelings and fears when I'm reading the news, when I see our ability to destroy, or when I learn about technology and what it's doing to the brain or to human relationships. With my team, we've built World Keepers as a way to explore the future. Imagine for a second that you live in 100 years, and then you find a time capsule. In this capsule, you can hear about the people of 2018, talking about the challenges that we're facing today. They advocate a more balanced approach to development, how to preserve our planet and our societies. I call them the sentinels because they're looking ahead and they're warning us about the rapids that we're heading towards. So what I'm exploring now is, when we find this time capsule, will this message have been heard and acted upon? Can this storytelling help trigger more feelings that can finally help us find ways to act? Will we have done what needs to be done so that this video can still be watched in 100 years? I started this journey with the idea I had to do something, but I didn't know exactly what or how. I learned a lot by doing, by meeting this monk protecting his forest, this woman saving the beach she lives by, this cool teacher showing trees how to plant trees. They're all creative and brave people who were not afraid to challenge the status quo. They'd learned about climate change without the internet, without telephone, without electricity. Some were pushed by a desire to save the planet, some others by a simple necessity to protect their livelihood. So I guess in echo to Theodore Monod, I think that we now know why we need to start moving, and hopefully finding this why was the hardest part for everybody. Now we need to figure out a way to feel and find how to do it. And because we're all different, this solution will be different for each of us. Feeling this how will be different for each of you. And this will have to come from within yourselves. Thank you.